whole lobby had descended on him and dispensed like street justice.
It certainly encourages us to lean more forward into giving opportunities to have friendly and fun interactions. I think it's an easy idea to reach for. I can put it that way.
After 4 months and 14 million copies sold, sci-fi extraction shooter Ark Raiders continues to draw in almost 6 million players a week across all platforms. Success that's even surprised its own developers, Embark Studios. Ahead of the Shrouded Sky update dropping on February 24th, we sat down with design director Virgil Watkins to discuss the game's unique aggression-based matchmaking, how Embark balances patches with new content, and what the future holds for the game.
Let me jump in with one of the hot topics at the moment, aggression-based matchmaking, which has been a hot topic amongst the community. In hindsight, do you guys regret kind of acknowledging the existence of the system?
We have been preparing comms around it, but there's no such thing as a friendly lobby or an aggressive lobby. The system is still mixing everybody, and everything's down to human motivation. Just because you're tending toward the more peaceful end doesn't remove the autonomy from other people making a choice about wanting your stuff. So I think people do feel as though it's incredibly binary, and even shooting one raider one time just automatically puts you into an aggressive lobby, but that's not at all how it works. It waits like, your engagement with PvP is part of the situation, and it's not as though one action does it. It's a series of rounds together and things like that.
I've seen people saying, well, you should just, if you're shot at, you should never even shoot back if you want to get into the safer end of the spectrum. But I feel like that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not nearly that like cut. We never really wanted to apply this mentality of like it being a hard split of like, yeah, you either play this way or you do not play this way. The game needs that element of tension and risk from other players to like be good. And of course we acknowledge that people are having a lot of fun with these like safer lobbies, but it's not prescriptive. Like we're never going to say like, oh, because you play this way, you're only going to experience these types of people.
Do you see this as something you're going to continue tweaking and tuning, but you broadly think that it's been a success?
The game, being with the game mode of extraction carries a lot of like inherent elements and expectations with it. And even as we've seen it in live, it is not at all how it was working in our tests, either for ourselves or the previous tests. It was hyper aggressive in those tests. People never worked together. So I think this kind of surprised us in exactly how many people do latch onto and are having fun with these elements of the game. So it certainly encourages us to lean more forward into giving opportunities to have friendly and fun interactions. But yeah, of course, we still need to cater to the PvP audience and make sure that they have like a fun and engaging time as well.
And how do you do that then? Because you've done like obviously the shared event at the moment, which kind of like encourages some of that PvE stuff. And how do you keep that PvP very vocal audience who just want to get in there and they get their kicks maybe somehow from taking your stuff, right?
We just have to primarily make sure that the PvP side of the game is as fair as we can make it. And like, obviously there's still things we need to work out with balance on some factors. We still have the mantra, and this is even regardless of the formation of this PvE heavy audience. The mantra is that the game never asks you to fight other players. That's entirely your own decision. You're always going to have people who have the motivation to fight because there are people who just like PvP and do those things. So I think we need to keep making sure we're providing them with like tools and means to do that in an engaging way. But you're absolutely correct. Like we have this cohort of players who want to play more peacefully or like role play even, and ensuring that like we don't harm their experience either. So it is a precarious position.
This is a real example. We're all just running around chatting, and one guy did, like you say, did the heel turn and killed someone, and within seconds the whole lobby had descended on him and dispensed like street justice. How do you feel about that kind of emergent gameplay?
Well, I mean, for me, that's actually kind of the hope with all of it is like letting players lead with their own motivations and create all those stories for each other. And that's not something we can ever like author or force to happen. And I'm glad that we don't try. I far prefer that we give players the means and the context and the opportunity to do these things, and then they do what they want to do. And I've even seen videos where people cause that kind of chaos on purpose. Like they'll have a silenced weapon and watch two people being friendly, and they'll shoot at just the right moment. The guy turns like, "Why'd you do that?" And then they get in a fight, and then a third guy shows up and it punishes the first guy, and then no one knows what's going on anymore. And I think those are some of the better moments you can hope to see.
How much do those post-match surveys play in terms of determining?
Zero factor.
Really? I assumed they would do something.
Those are just to help us gauge how players felt about the round. They have no like mechanical change on what happens to you. It is solely based on your actions in the round.
We're now into kind of midway through the second big expedition. I know you've talked in the past about it being something that you wanted to kind of tweak and adapt, and you changed the stash value that was required for the full number of points. But in the longer term, how long do you see that loop of kind of resetting, re-earning blueprints remaining kind of interesting?
It is a bit of an experiment, and because we didn't want to force resets on everyone, then now we're on this road of like, how do we make it interesting enough for the largest amount of people to participate in this? The currency system we have today was just what we had time to develop, and we reduced it, of course, for Expedition 2, just because even though at the time we calibrated the 5 million around what the average player's economy looked like, it still, I think, overshot in how much people felt like they had to engage with it, or how much they felt compelled to chase that, which is why we brought it down. But because of other things that were actively in development, we didn't have time to shift the system to what we intend to do next. And we want to tie in essentially more game loops into it and not just make it about the currency value. So ideally, we'll be able to talk about that fairly soon. I wouldn't say there's going to be like major changes in one giant drop, but definitely we're going to try to like adjust and shave off pain points and make sure that, you know, the incentives we are providing, you know, are catching what people find compelling. So like skill points probably won't hold forever. Of course, we don't want people to be able to max out the entire skill tree. That's not the way it's designed. And then of course, at some point, we're very likely going to revamp parts of the skill tree. So we have to keep it forward on that. So then what other elements do we make part of the expedition system to keep it enticing?
Would you consider allowing people to bring like 1 or 3 blueprints across, almost like as a safe pocket of like, you can just bring these ones?
Yeah, I mean that was an idea we even had before launch about that. And the blueprints in particular are such like a power elevation. Like now you have the autonomy to craft this thing very deliberately. And does that fit in? And then as well, like if we ever make, and as you saw, we have made adjustments to the blueprint drop rates and things like that. So, but I certainly don't think it's off the table. Of course, it's a very rational thing for players to want to do, is like, I work really hard for these and please let me have a few of them. So, yeah, I wouldn't say like no to any idea along those lines. It's mostly about how do you balance what is kind of part of the core run up through progression, and blueprints are a significant part of that, of actually getting them.
You know, you spent years developing Arc Raiders, and it's now the case where you're kind of building up the muscle of running this sort of live service game. What have been the biggest kind of lessons that you've learned so far beyond, you know, the need for patch notes to be comprehensive? But what's kind of surprised you that you're like, oh, I didn't expect that?
I mean, I think one thing is the amount of times you have to drop what you're doing and respond to an active issue. So really crazy bug is found, or you get suddenly massive DDoS attacks for 8 hours straight, or a lot of our team like wasn't ready to like drop what they were doing and respond to that. So then you're like, well, I'm working on this new feature and working on this thing, and now I have to respond to this, and that takes up like 2 days of my time to deal with that. So I think that's been a bit of the growing pain, especially at the scale we have now. Like nobody whatsoever thought we'd have this many players.
You know, the most popular streamer of the game, the VTuber Burnt Peanut, was kind of doing this stuff live on stream, tossing nades around. By his own kind of suggestion, he was only doing it against people who were doing it to him, and he wanted to bring it to you guys' attention so that it would be fixed quickly. And I've seen the community completely split between, well, it's good because they fixed it the next day and maybe they wouldn't have if he hadn't have highlighted it, and other people going, well, you can't have a 2-lane justice system, he should be banned with everyone else. Like, where are you on kind of how you handle that sort of thing?
All I can say with this issue in particular was more coincidence. We already had a fix ready to go for it when it kind of exploded. But of course, like, you know, you'll have things come to your attention in a very loud way through some channels, and then it becomes hard to gauge, you know, the level at which it's being used. So I don't feel as though there's a 2-lane thing. Like, we respond to stuff the moment we know about it. It just takes time to patch certain issues compared to others.
Obviously, in this same like service game space, some very high profile failures as well. Like we saw Concord kind of flame out, and then Highguard obviously making layoffs. Do you kind of like imagine a world in which, you know, if you had one bad trailer, like, or one trailer that was received badly, like as the kind of final moment of the game, or was it that could have been your future? Do you consider like that's the kind of tightrope that these kind of games are on at the moment? I
think we were fortunate in that we'd been building the game for so long, and like it was already fun for us, and we were just hoping that translated. And I think in some of these situations where you might see a piece of media and then it's hard for you to gauge what actually having your hands on it is like, puts you in a bit of a position. Like, and then we because we've been doing tests, and like Tech Test 2 for us was obviously a pivotal moment where we really got huge amounts of player response. So I think that helped us calibrate where we went with a lot of like real public data to an extent. But certainly I think it's hard when you can't manage expectations through those things. We've even seen that, like even around Tech Test 2, we had the whole countdown to a countdown thing. No one really intended for that. We're just like, ooh, everyone's excited. So are we. Let's count down to something. And of course, the narrative around Shadow Drop popped up, and we didn't jump on that quickly enough. And then obviously everyone's very disappointed that they couldn't play the game right there. And then I don't envy those positions for sure.
Do you think Ark being a paid game actually probably did it a service, because players then, you kind of had to commit to it, right? It wasn't like they just played 2 rounds and went, no, it's not for me, and kind of dipped out. They were kind of like on board with it because they'd spent the $40 maybe.
Yeah, I have to imagine so. I mean, just using my own gamer brain, that's how I tend to feel about stuff. You know, I do a bit more research into it. I'll watch content creators or reviews that I feel like I align with, like how they feel about stuff. And then when I make the purchase, I feel like I'm generally more informed than as opposed to like free-to-play games where I'll just give it a go because, oh, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, you lack that sort of personal investment. So I think that definitely did us some favors. And it's part of the reason why we changed back then from free-to-play to paid, because then we felt like we could build a product that was more appropriate for that.
Going back to Ark's kind of PvE side about the Matriarch and the Queen boss fights, I love them. I think they're spectacular. They're like almost nothing else I've done in gaming. They're closest almost to like raid bosses in something like Destiny. But I've seen a lot of frustration from players about how the kind of like loot is portioned out. And I know you changed the drop rate of the cores in the legs, but having so much of the loot in that central orb, it often feels like the boss dies and almost no one gets anything. Are there kind of changes maybe coming to those encounters?
I mean, yeah, we keep evaluating how it's going, but those things, even though they're like huge and deadly, they're not intended for like the full server to go up against and get equally rewarded. It is meant to be like, you know, a couple of dedicated squads maybe working together while also dealing with other players as a factor that they have to manage.
That's not how they're being played, though, I don't think.
I mean, it is pretty mixed. Then you get the players who do end up in the slightly friendlier lobbies. You do get like everybody working together, and then there's that moment like, okay, does everyone just fight it out now over what loot there is, or is the whole thing a PvP bloodbath the whole time? So it's pretty spread for how people are actually engaging with it.
With those enormous Ark on the horizon in Bluegate and a few other maps, I had this idea, because you can't just keep making bigger encounter models, that when we finally meet those, one of those will be in a map itself. 1 to 10, how close am I?
It's I think it's an easy idea to reach for. I can put it that way.
We've got the roadmap now for the rest of the year, and there's kind of talk of, you know, new maps and new Ark in there. Can you talk to me a bit about how you see new weapons and items being rolled out?
I think we're striving to always try to have a little bit of something with each drop, and what we're doing right now is trying to make it as cohesive as possible with whatever that drop is, so there's some interrelation between the other things coming in those updates, and like whether that's how you obtain the item or the item's useful in that situation, or things like that. So that would be the intent, I suppose, with how we drop those things.
So we shouldn't expect just like 2 new SMGs and a new scope rifle, and that's not going to be the case?
I mean, it could be. It's just not necessarily what I'm going to like state we're doing. It's more needs-based right now.
Back in 2021, Tom Solberg from Embark, I believe, published an explanation of how you guys were using machine learning to teach Ark how to move and animate. I've seen since the game came out, people like, and I'm sure it's their imaginations, but attributing the idea that some of the Ark are learning, like the leapers are finding their way into tighter spaces, or the ticks are banding together. But
right,
are you using anything kind of AI related for kind of like?
No, none whatsoever. Okay. That's just our AI designers and our AI engineers. And to be specific, I mean like AI in the game sense. It's like the ones who author our enemies. That's their work. We don't use. The machine learning is literally only for teaching them to walk and navigate the environment. It doesn't do any of their behaviors or their attacks or anything like that. That's just us in the way we author them.
Well, I guess that's the highest compliment they can be paid then.
It is funny to see, and yeah, it's interesting.
None of the existing arcs are kind of humanoid in nature. They're either like, weaponized, scaled up drones, or I feel like they take their inspiration from animals like spiders and crabs and kind of beetles and stuff. Do you have an internal design rule of like no Terminator style robot dudes walking around?
Yeah, at present, because I really think the distinction between that silhouette being a player is pretty important. And as well, once you have something that's humanoid in shape, you start being way more critical of how it moves and behaves and acts near you. And then you run into situations where it just kind of falls apart aesthetically or in behavior once it's a humanoid. And also it's kind of been done to death. So I don't know what our ambition is there, but we get a lot more interesting gameplay and freedom with making a platform that's purpose built.
We also got to speak to Bence Pajor, audio director at Embark Studios, on how he and his team craft the futuristic yet tactile soundscape of Arc Raiders.
The weapons in Arc Raiders are essentially like repurposed junk. It's scrap metal, homemade bullets. Is it strange for you to kind of like having to make the audio for a gun that's supposed to be kind of made of crap?
It's quite inspiring, I think. We discussed this with the people designing them, and when we figure out the visual design, we talk about how it's made and what the inner parts could be, and then I try to just make something out of that.
How has the process for capturing gun sounds changed over time? I remember like back in my early days of the industry, we would always be told, the audio guys were going out to gun ranges and shooting a bazillion guns and kind of getting live stuff. Do you still do that, or is it more kind of, you're in tools and creating just sounds from scratch?
No, we record them. That's the best way of getting something that sounds believable. So we still do the massive gun recordings. They don't have to be massive, but once you go out, you want to record as much as possible.
For the Ark themselves, it sounds like their kind of audio cues take a lot of inspiration from animals, I would say. At least it sounds like to me. There's kind of sort of almost like elephantine kind of like noises and stuff. Can you talk to me a bit about kind of like what your inspiration was there and how you tackled making each of them feel very individual so that you could hear, for instance, when it's a hornet behind you versus when it's a leaper?
Well, it's kind of the same thing there. We look at the shape of the thing and try to figure out like if this would communicate, how would it sound? We've tried to stay away from them being too much like animals because they're giant robots. So we try to keep it very mechanical, but at the same time you want some expression to it. You want it to express something. So it's easy to go down the biological route because that has a lot of expression. We try to combine that with a lot of mechanical noises. We do weird recordings for that as well, and then in some cases we've mixed that with the heavily processed animal noises as well.
Arc Raiders is like one of the only games I can't play while like having a TV show on or like listening to a podcast, because I need to be so concentrated on the soundscape to try and work out like what's approaching me. What the little kind of tricks you use to create tension in the soundscape, where it's like not necessarily a player there or a robot, but you're trying to ratchet up that feeling of like you really need to be listening to what's going on around you.
I have an idea that if you try to capture ordinary things, like mundane daily sounds that you hear every day when you move about, and try to get them in to create some kind of familiarity to what you hear, it's easier to understand what's going on around you then. And then hearing the slightly more concerning sounds, the contrast there creates quite a lot of tension as well. And just as the game plays, there's a lot of downtime that creates pauses in the excitement. And I think those are super important for the tension, because you sort of know that there can be a very dangerous situation at any moment, but you're not hearing it yet. So it kind of raises the tension, and you keep listening for dangers and trying to understand, like, is there danger somewhere? I think the contrast between boring, ordinary, mundane sounds and then you're listening for the dangerous ones, creates a lot of tension.
It's not doing my cortisol level any good. I'm stressed the whole time.
Yeah.
For the latest on Shrouded Sky and all things Arc Raiders, head over to PCGamer.com. And for more in-depth developer interviews like this, subscribe to PC Gamer.